The Dwarfs. They are a very distinct faction in the Warhammer world, both in terms of lore and how they perform on the battlefield. They are the campiest of campers, having short little legs, good range. They don't trust magic. They use runes instead, which is basically magic, but let's just not call it that. Not the most powerful faction in Total Warhammer by a long shot, but against the ill-prepared, they can provide a strong adversary, both for, or they can be a strong adversary, both against Empire, Chaos, and Orcs and Goblins. Very few people go with just the standard Lord. He comes with the standard Lordy skills. A lot of armor, charge defense against all, which means that this fellow isn't going to take any charge damage. He might take impact damage, but not any weapon damage on the charge from the charge bonus. Then we have Ungrim Iron Fist. He only has charge defense against all, but he will never break. He has Death Blow, plus 8% splash attack, plus 8% armor piercing. So a lot of people choose to go for Ungrim Iron Fist. He doesn't have a shield, but he does have missile resistance of 15%. Something you'll note with all of the dwarves is that they have a magical resistance of 25%, which means that the damage from missile attacks is reduced by 25%, which is sort of handy. So Ungrim Iron Fist is a very strong melee character. Which, I mean, he's the only unbreakable dwarven character. Then we have Thorgrim Grudgebearer. He's decent enough. High King augments an area. The bonus isn't that great, and a charge bonus increase for dwarfs really isn't something to write home about. He does have a magical melee attack, which makes him more useful against immaterial units. But he does have more weapon strength than Mr. Ungrim, but Ungrim's armor piercing is 285, whereas Thorgrim Grudgebearer's armor piercing is only 160. So quite the difference there, and Thorgrim also slightly slower. The Thane, your standard melee character, there isn't much to say about him. People usually don't bring him, and for good reason. The Master Engineer, however, has a rifle that does extreme damage, extreme armor piercing damage, relatively short range, decent melee combatant, ballistics experts. So this unit improves all nearby friendly missile units. Ballistics calibration, increased reload time, increased accuracy, also increasing the explosion damage of missile units. So if you choose to go with, let's say, fairly standard dwarven setup, would be something like 2 cannons, 2 thunderers, Ungrim Iron Fist. Then you'll have some, you'll have some hammerers. You'll have some longbeards. Then you'll have some, you have some miners with blasting charges. Let's just say this is your army. There are many other variations of the dwarven armies, but let's just say you have this. The Master Engineer can go in between the cannons, protected by the thunderers, and do damage at range, and also dissuade any flyers from landing, together with something like hammers. So yeah, the Master Engineer, you do pay a pretty penny for him. Can be useful. Then we have the Runesmith. Uses runic magic, so there we have it. He gives everyone around him plus 4% armor piercing damage, which might not seem like a whole lot. But if you look at a unit like the hammers here, 4% of 40, it's still not a whole lot. When you're getting into the hundreds, then it's decent. So with an armor piercing, let's say he has 300 armor piercing, so 4% of 300 would be 12. So yeah, an increase of 12 or around 10 for Ungrim. So not something to write home about. You don't see the Runesmith being used too often. He has the Rune of Oath and Steel, increasing armor, the Rune of Wrath and Ruin. This is kind of like Fate of Buna, only that it doesn't use power. The Rune of Negation also can be very useful in select engagements, giving 44% damage increase on top of the armor of the Dwarfs can be very, very useful and allow you to tough out a few select engagements. So for the Dwarfs, the Runesmith and Ungrim Iron Fist, sure, they are expensive, they are relatively immobile, but for key points in the battle, those two can be very good. Miners, Vanguard deployment, armor piercing, low melee attack, low melee defense, high armor, standard dwarven stuff. For only 75 more, you get miners with blasting charges, which has a relatively short range, only one ammunition, but it can flatten enemy front lines. If the enemy is something like orc boys, savage boys, whatever the enemy wants to rush you with, these units can be Vanguard deployed and they can do a lot of damage. Dwarf warriors, you don't see them used that often. Fairly low weapon strength, sturdy, tanky, but they just don't seem to do the damage they need to. Charge defense versus large seems to be mostly something that units with shields have, so the miners do not have it. Then we get to the dwarf warriors with great weapons. I don't see that unit being used too often either. I think part of the reason is because that longbeards are marginally more expensive, but with the longbeards you get immune to psychology, which makes them immune to fear and terror, and it also gives they also have encourage, increasing leadership to units around them. So that, together with charge defense against large, more armor, makes the longbeards with great weapons. I know they also have greater weapon strength, so these units will come out on top in more engagements, the longbeards. Then we have the slayers. You rarely see slayers used in multiplayer. They do have death blow, they do have unbreakable, they do have missile resistance of 25% because of whirling axes. But the thing is, at 1100 and not being able to catch the monsters they're supposed to kill, they sort of have to wait until the monsters are engaged and then get in and destroy them. So a more reliable counter a lot of the times is thunderers and other ranged units of cannons, for example, is more reliable for killing monsters at long range. You're not sure to even get your slayers to where they need to be. Hammerers are quite interesting. They have a lot of armor, they have very high weapon strength, high armor piercing damage, they don't have any damage versus anything, their melee attack is good, and this unit will defeat demogryphs on the charge. Very hard unit, but the price is quite insane, and so is the price for the Ironbreakers, quite insane. If you look at the weapon strength of 30 here with only 7 armor piercing, sure, they have a lot of armor, they do have 2 ammunition with their blasting charges, they can be very nice in select scenarios, but this is a unit that rarely pays for itself. Nice selection of missile infantry. Quarrelers, good range, well able to fire above the backs of units standing in front of them. Quarrelers with great weapons, a waste of funds in my opinion. Thunderers can be nice for... The thing with the dwarven range is that the Quarrelers and the Thunderers have shields. They have armor and shields, so they will trade very well against enemy skirmish. The Quarrelers have longer range, lower armor penetration. The Thunderers have shorter range, higher armor penetration. Iron Drakes, fun in campaign, in multiplayer. Haven't seen them used to good effect. 70% fire resistance. It's kind of funny because the reason why they have fire resistance is because they're supposed to fight the biggest, the baddest monsters, so dragons, for example. So yeah, presumably the fire resistance is so they don't cook themselves to death with their own flamethrowers. And then we have the Iron Drakes with the Troll Hammer torpedo. And the Trollhammer torpedo, it will wreck large units. It will stagger them, but the short range and small man count in the unit means that this is a unit that's very hard to use effectively. It gets really interesting with the gyrocopters and the different gyrocopters. They come from the standard gyrocopter, range 70, missile damage 68. It has 2 bombs. The gyrocopter with the brimstone gun, that's more geared towards taking down large foes. And then you have the gyro bomber, which comes with more bombs. In some gyrocopters can be very effective against targets like giants, Ragnarok spiders. Thing is, they will lose to most other flyers very handily. 0 melee defense, 5 melee defense, 5 melee defense. They will get hit a lot. There are few helicopters in the unit, and it means that most flyers will be able to hunt them down and deal the damage. The grudge thrower can be nice. It's less reliable for killing monsters than the cannon. So in most cases, I think the cannon is a better option. Also because the cannon is more reliably able to knock down, say, a giant and prevent it from moving towards you. Flame cannon, very unreliable, too short range to be effective. It can be fun for burning the shit out of goblins and zombies in campaign, but that's about it. So for the dwarves, you have a few options when it comes to army selection. You can have a ninja boom squad that I've showed you before, or that I might show you after this in a battle. So you have miners with blasting charges up front, and then you can have iron breakers and take away an iron breaker. This is the full chaos boom squad, full dwarf chaos boom squad, by the way, where you just have units with blasting charges, more of a troll army than anything else. Then you have a balanced dwarven army. Would be something like, let's see, 2 thunderers, 2 cannons. Could have a master engineer or runesmith, your choice. Then hammers, longbeards, and miners with blasting charges, for example. Or you could have a dwarf rush, in which case you could go for a runesmith, and you could have hammers are quite hard and handy. Miners, if you want a dwarf bum rush, this is what it could look like. Some great weapons and some some dwarf warriors, and you can see part of the too many dwarf warriors. So the dwarf, you will be hard pressed to field a full stack of dwarfs. It can work, it's just that with your low mobility you risk getting shot to pieces, and flying units are also a problem if you don't go relatively balanced with the dwarfs. Now the dwarfs have some direct counter possibilities towards all giant armies and the like, which include, if we say we're limited to bringing max 6 of the same unit, then they can do this. Just put Ungren Iron Fist in the corner and shoot the giants to death. But I mean, you do risk running out of ammunition, and if you meet a somewhat balanced army, at the best you're going to have fun just bombing the shit out of it before your gyrocopters explode. So with the dwarves you get extraordinarily effective campers, an army that is hard to use on the offense because of its low mobility, and you can have some fun with this army against people, I mean, I've run into trouble against the dwarfs a few times because I've played with an army that I'm not used to playing with, made some poor decisions, and if you make a few poor decisions against the dwarfs, they will punish you for it, because they do have the potential to do damage both at range and in close combat. So one needs to be a bit careful about how one approaches the dwarfs on the battlefield. Strength and honor.